So there's a huge debate going on amongst the left right now, and it's about what the causes and the solutions to this current red pill demand crisis is. And so you can see whether it be Jordan Peterson or Kevin Samuels or Andrew Tate, these people are just popping up like whack-a-mole, and it's infected society so much to the point where channels that are entirely independent creators of something else, Dragon Ball Z, basketball, whatever, they're spewing the same garbage that they're saying. So it's infected every level of society. And so now the question is, okay, well, what is the cause and what is the solution? Now, the solution that has been attempted is everyone just tries to cancel Jordan Peterson, cancel Kevin Samuels, cancel Andrew Tate. That's not going to work. It's not going to succeed at all. Because just like drugs, okay, if you just attack the supply, you're not going to get rid of the demand. You need to attack the demand, because really supply is going to follow demand, not vice versa. So just like drugs, where the war on drugs is, oh, let's ban drugs, that's partially also an attack on demand, but also it's to get rid of supply, to really get rid of supply. And it's been a colossal failure, because if the demand is still there, the supply will be there. And so just like I'm showing you, like Jordan Peterson, Kevin Samuels, just all these people, it's whack-a-mole, right? So that's not working. So really what you have to do is you have to attack the demand of this product. And so now people are getting into a debate over both the causes and the solutions. So this is set off by this dude. He says, the reason young men flock to alt-right MRA movements is because the left gives brain-dead advice to young men. We need to be more compassionate to them for our own sake. So MRA is men's rights activist. But I don't think that the left gives brain-dead advice to young men. I think that it doesn't give any advice to young men. It doesn't gear any sort of ideas or guidance or anything towards young men. And so the issue is not that it's negative, it's that it's non-existent. It's that it doesn't exist in the first place. And so Vosh, he absolutely sets this off really massively, and he's huge now. I mean, I remember him when he was at averaging 60 concurrents on Twitch, and now he's just absolutely insanely huge. And so he's interesting because he's like a socialist who's down to do stuff in capitalism, even though it's not socialist, because it's just the best scenario. It's kind of like what Noam Chomsky agrees with, or I guess Michael Brooks was the first one like that in kind of the online community. But anyways, he says, objectively true and correct-pilled, the left is basically ceded all male self-help discourse to the right. This isn't even a controversial position. I've heard people talking about this problem for years. So I personally have not heard people talking about this problem for years at all. In fact, this conversation only really seems to have started in maybe the past year, if that, maximum 2 years. I've definitely thought about it like a year or two ago, but I have not heard anybody talking about this. This really seems to really have just started now to really be in the mainstream in terms of people talking about it. And so it has ceded self-help discourse to the right. But this clearly is a controversial position. I disagree with that as well, as is going to be proven by all the controversy caused by his tweet, right? It's almost like self-debunking, right? But from the response, obviously. But just so you get a kind of a feel for it, there's a tweet he sent out. He said, hey, not to be sexist, but it's pretty wild how all the most popular male role model life advice guys end up being the worst human beings on earth. So this is not some anti-feminist, anti-SJW guy. This is a feminist dude. And so the people who are saying this stuff are not like the anti-SJW, anti-feminist movement people at all. And so here was a big tweet. This person says, do you guys need to be taught to do everything now? Everyone else seems to be doing just fine without whatever you're asking for. So I find it hilarious that everyone else seems to be doing just fine. I thought the big thing about the left was that things are not fine. We need to change things. 40,000 people die every year because they don't have access to healthcare. People are in poverty, homeless is massive, student loan debts are crushing people. And so we need to change things. That's what I thought being progressive meant. I thought that that's what it meant. I thought women were not doing fine, and so we needed to, crush misogyny and bring actual, equality. That's what I thought, right? So I didn't know everyone was doing fine, apparently. I thought it was the actual opposite of that. So I find that to be very bizarre in the first place. But I would say, yes, guys do need to be taught everything. I'm just going to keep it real. They do. I think that is what needs to happen. I think that that's just true. But, a lot of people here get pissed saying, why does he have to say his nonsense in the most annoying way possible? Again, that kind of stuff is annoying because this isn't even actually attacking the argument. It's just attacking just random vague, oh, why does he have to say this and that? There's no substance to this whatever. It's just a waste of time in the dialogue. These guys never follow up by tackling this issue themselves despite demanding it semi-regularly, so it just ends up feeling like they expect women to do it. And if your actual complaint is that leftist women don't coddle you as much as right-wing tradwives would, then get bent. I find this get bent thing weird as like an insult. Like, it's weird to make that an insult, like considering women are the ones getting bent. Like, isn't that like a misogynistic thing in and of itself? I've never even heard a man say that, which is very bizarre, but I don't know, weird stuff. It's not even, this issue is weird because it's not even a gender divide issue. And this is the weird position we're getting to now, where it's not even a gender divide issue anymore. Like, I just took a poll. I already had noticed this myself by looking at opinion polls about abortion, but it was like, in my public opinion class, we learned that gender is actually not really that good of a predictor of like specific issues, like abortion, for example. They're pretty much the same. The difference between men and women's opinion on abortion isn't actually that different, because, like, you know, for every feminist you have, there's also going to be male feminists, right? And so it's more determined by views on gender, right? So there are women who are like really misogynistic and sexist themselves. So it's not even a gender thing, anymore. But everybody is, really a lot of people, I should say, not everybody, but a lot of people are getting to really go off. It's so pathetic and annoying, this underlying assumption that cis straight men are like some kind of blank page that must be written on by someone is demeaning to men and to everyone else who are expected to not be evil on our own, to be socialized by living in society. And so it's not that necessarily they're a blank page, but it's like, and you're not writing them, you're just giving guidance and like good advice and that kind of a thing. And so it's not about like, I think it's just like a straw man, like, oh, the blank page that must be written by someone. Also, keep in mind, a lot of the shaisa that like these people think, like, you're very, very heavily, your views are heavily set by when you're 2, 3, 4 years old, when you're a child, what your parents set, what your family structure sets, what your family friend structure sets. Are you around any black people? If you're not, it's probably your view of black people may not be what it normally should be if you're around black people. Or is your family racist? Are your parents racist? Is your familial structure racist? Does your family say bad things about people who are dark-skinned? These are all like that. And so by the time we're talking about like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, like those kinds of ages, people are already written. And so a lot of it has to be erased, right? And written with something better. But, it's not about like writing it like that, but it's like, giving just advice and guidance. So I think it's just like kind of arguing from the extreme kind of fallacy. But I just think that this is just, a situation where it's not, good. This person says, men don't fall down the alt-right MRA pipeline because the left isn't doing good enough outreach. They choose to subscribe to fascist ideology because they have an investment in maintaining their position. The social hierarchy and liberation of other groups threatens that. So I'm sure this is partially true. Like, I'm sure that there is definitely a selection bias for like confirmation bias for like men who are looking to sort of reset and recontinue those kinds of like power structures and that kind of thing, which again I think are really taught at home too. Those kinds of structures really are taught at home as well. And so there is going to be some of that for sure, but that doesn't mean that all of it is based on that. I think it would be incredibly reductionist, like super reductionist, to say one or the other, to say that the entire debate or the entire source of it is that they choose to, want to have confirmation bias to maintain their position in the social hierarchy, or the vice versa in this case, which would be, oh, it's all because the left has no advice. That's also not true. It's some of both, obviously, for sure. This person says, Vosh is a worthless scoundrel and we all know it, but it's important to point out what he's actually doing here and what all men who have pushed this line recently are doing. They are blaming women for being killed, raped, exploited. They are blaming feminism for misogyny. So it's not about blaming feminism for, first of all, right, hypothetically, even if you were to like, let's say hypothetically I granted you your premise that you're blaming feminism for misogyny, it's like his thing of giving like good advice isn't in odds with feminism, but there's also this issue of efficacy versus morality and virtue, and these two rarely actually end up aligning. I would say a lot of times they don't align, and so getting your actual goal done might actually be like in the opposite or not following that. But I don't think that that's necessarily, I don't think that that's what Vosh is doing here at all. Again, this is not really an issue of like bad in terms of something said is bad, but it's an agnosticism, and that's what it seems like he's saying. And I agree with this completely. This is what I think as well, personally. And so Vosh responds saying, I cannot stress enough how important it is to understand that 12-year-old white boys on Twitch are not being pulled into fascism because of some Machiavellian desire to preserve and expand their privileges. It's because the right talks to them and the left doesn't. So this is what it is. So this is the thing. This is a big issue. It's not that like, oh, feminism is the problem. The issue is the agnosticism of only, talking about feminist stuff and then not, reaching out to those white boys and leaving them behind, right? And so the male has been left behind. The white male has been left behind, and because everything is, oh, let's create this for black women or black people or Muslims or this and that. Those people, and there's another thing I learned in my public opinion class, there are not only differences between like out-group resentment and in-group like identity, but you have this thing of like people who are isolated, discriminated against, and like deprived from society. They come together to form like groups together. And so somebody who's like black or is getting advice from and guidance from their family or like church and things like that because they're discriminated against. White people are not discriminated against, and so it just kind of ends up being an agnosticism that ends up going. You can make the argument that the stuff in general is like kind of geared because it's like already by default white, but it's not like super blatant in the same way that it is where you like gear content specifically towards specific groups. But that's done on purpose, obviously, because they're discriminated against, right? He then says, leftists and progressives have absolutely no idea how unnecessarily repellent they come off to so many people. They get angry at the idea of being a more effective social movement because they don't want to share their social spaces with people who might gone another way. Leftists will write master's theses on the effect of socioeconomic conditions on crime, and then shrug when 10 million more young men fall to fascism because their boy brains must just be innately fascist, and they chose to be evil, and there's no way this could have been prevented. Kyle Kalinsky of Secular Talk also jumps in. He says, truly fascinating that anybody takes issue with, quote, hey, let's try to do better outreach and change minds with good arguments. Anybody who thinks this is wrong isn't doing politics, they're doing niche subculture gatekeeping. Vosh says, holy shisa, dude, literally these people would go back in time and tell MLK to stop reaching out to white people if they could, I swear to Christ. That probably does seem like something maybe that is also probably a... potentially a ad hominem post-mortem fallacy, but, I don't know. It's used for rhetoric, but it does seem to be an issue going on here in terms of some things where it is an issue of, okay, like this is not a good strategy in any way. And so Vosh has another hypothesis here. He says, getting the feeling some leftists are actually okay with the increasing popularity of incel/neo-chauvinist ideas because it confirms their pre-existing biases against men. I do not know what else to make of the 5 million times I've seen we should do a better job of reaching out to men so they don't fall down the incel pipeline, followed by, wow, so you want to coddle incels? Rapists, you think rape is women's fault? Well, boo-hoo, etc., etc. Reminds me of conservatives complaining about black crime, and then when you say, hey, buddy, maybe we could try like addressing racial inequality, they start screeching about how you want to coddle criminals. They like the crime because it confirms their biases. Obviously, it's not fully analogous because black people are an oppressed minority and men aren't, but the reflexive desire to complain about group problems but not address them because the existence of these problems justifies the complaining is analogous. It's reactionary. And so I would say that I don't really agree with this. I would say I personally don't agree with this hypothesis really in terms of like, oh, well, I'm seeing that like, oh, like they're okay with it because they want men to be bad, or like, to basically confirm their biases. I don't think that it's that like they want them to be bad, like they have a vested interest in them being bad, but I think a lot of it is kind of like sort of defensive in terms of like, wow, like look, why do we have to do so much for men when they're doing bad stuff? I don't think that it's like, oh, I subconsciously or just like want men to be bad so that I can point it out. But I think it's just something where it's like a defensive thing where it's like, why should we help them kind of thing. It's like they're already the ones in power. Why would we need to do this? Which is understandable in terms of logically speaking, right? It's an understandable thought process. I just think that thought process is wrong. Because yeah, guys do need to be taught to do stuff, and everybody is taught to do stuff essentially, right? That's the way it goes. And first of all, everyone's not doing just fine. B, all those groups get massive amounts of guidance, like all of them, whether you're black, you're Muslim, you're a woman, you have people guiding you nonstop, because anytime a group is discriminated, isolated, or deprived, they come together with in-group identity, And so they have whereas like white people don't have like huge in-group identity, they have massive out-group resentment, right? Whereas like black people aren't going to have like a ton of out-group resentment towards white people, but they're going to have a very high in-group identity because of being discriminated, isolated, and deprived, right? And so they are getting that. And so I just think that this agnosticism of let's just leave it be, I think it's a bad strategy, efficaciously speaking. And I don't think that there's any sort of like moral issue here where it's like, oh, you're blaming feminism or anything like that. I don't think that is it at all. And I'm seeing just such horrible values being pushed on society as a whole, where now it's all about, oh, like if you put out a good video, a high substantive content video, and then it gets low views, people are like, whoa, dude, that's so sad. You're getting low views. Dude, his views are down. Think about like the Secular Talk channel where it's like, his whole audience is like, why is Kyle not growing? Why is his channel not growing? His views are down, all this stuff. And it's like, dude, we've become so obsessed with the fake stuff, views, money, clicks, clout, that's all people care about. And then you also have all of this stuff of, the Andrew Tate bullshit where it's like, oh, it's all about having cars and Ferraris and all this stuff. Like, no, those are not the values, things that make you a man. Those are not high value things. High value things is having, things that you enjoy doing, hobbies, like solid social relationships with family, friends, your partner, having things that you actually enjoy, trying your best to be healthy in terms of like, working out or eating healthy foods in a healthy way, not like, oh, like I'm gonna just like cut out all carbs, but just like add something in a day, like maybe start eating vegetables a day, and you continue that kind of thing, right? Those are the kinds of thing, and education and those kinds of things. And there's intrinsic human value too. Marx says this. He sees one of his big criticisms of capitalism is, hey, the value that's given to humans is based on your productivity level. And so if you're somebody on welfare, your value to society as a human is very low. Actually, it's considered negative. People consider you like subhuman because you're taking the money, right? But he says no, like human beings have intrinsic human value. And I think that's absolutely true. And so there's intrinsic human value that exists as well. And so if you just let people write that stuff, right, and just say like, create the narrative, that's the only narrative that exists. There's not even a fighting narrative. And so we need to start talking about what it actually means to be a man. It's not it's not like a manly thing to use, like, oh, like go make me a sandwich, like Jackson Stinkle, as like an insult to a woman. That's not being a man. Being a man is not like, having a bunch of girls or any of that stuff. That's not what it means to be a man. And I don't even really see how that should be controversial, to be honest. So this is a weird thing where it's kind of like, I don't really get it, but I think it's just a defensive thing of like, I think it's illogical personally. I could understand the initial thought process. I just think that thought process is dead fucking wrong, is what I think. So it's kind of a defensive thing of like, oh, they're in power, they have all the societal structure with them. Why do we need to cater anything towards them? So I get that, but it's wrong. It's dead wrong. Everybody needs things catered to them, and everybody else is getting that guidance, is getting that help because of the reasons I just explained to you. But white people are not getting it for the reasons I just explained to you, right? The political science reasons I just explained to you. And so I think this is just a bad idea. And so we need to change the narrative and change it. And it's not a good thing. It's not a high value thing to just like have a bunch of girls or use insulting misogynistic comments or think of women as lesser, things like that. Having a bunch of cars, none of that stuff makes you a man. If anything, that makes you not a man. That's the opposite. And so we need to start saying that kind of stuff. And even when it comes to things, whether it be socializing with people and things like that, people need help with that kind of thing too. And so those are all things that we need to start talking about. And so this shouldn't be controversial, but I kind of get like where it can kind of come from in terms of a defensive position of like, oh, but why do they need it? They're in power, which is understandable. It's just wrong though. It's just wrong. But let me know your thoughts down below. Curious to hear them.